Now we're going to move on to our keynote speaker. Commissioner and Senator Robert Gordon, was nominated to serve as Commissioner of the Board of Public Utilities by Governor Phil Murphy and confirmed by the Senate in 2018. At the time of his nomination, he had served more than 14 years in the legislature, 10 of those in the Senate, where he attained the positions of Majority Conference Leader, Chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, and Legislative Manufacturing Caucus, and the Senate Legislative Oversight Committee. Commissioner Gordon's career has spanned the public and private sectors. In his public career, he has served at every level of the government. He was drawn to public affairs by a lifelong interest in environmental issues. His first job was at the President's Council on Environmental Quality. During his early career in Washington, he worked on the economic staff of the Brookings Institution, a public policy research institution, and later, the inception of the Congressional Budget Office, joined that agency as an analyst focusing on natural resource programs. At the state and local levels, Commissioner Gordon served as an aide to Governor Jim Florio and spent 10 years as mayor and council member of the borough of Fairlawn. Commissioner Gordon conducted extensive investigatory hearings on the deficiencies of the New Jersey Transit and the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. As a result of these investigations, Senator Gordon advanced legislation that led to major reforms in the transparency and accountability of these organizations. He also led a bipartisan effort that secured a $3.5 billion appropriation for a new Port Authority bus terminal. Other legislation he sponsored improved access to mental health services, streamlined the cleanup of hazardous waste sites, and reformed the governance of community associations. Commissioner Gordon earned his undergraduate degree in political economy and environmental studies from Williams College, where he graduated Pi Beta Kappa and magna cum laude. He also has a Master of Public Policy degree from the University of California at Berkeley, and, that's not enough, an MBA in Finance and Healthcare Management from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. Very impressive. I am delighted to introduce our keynote speaker, Commissioner and Senator Bob Gordon.
Thank you, Laura. That introduction is about as long as my keynote, I think. I am standing in today for Joe Fiordaliso, and I'm hoping that I can do the great job that he would do. And I want to extend my thanks to President Cole and to Dr. Lal for the invitation to be here. Joe Fiordaliso sends his regrets and wishes that he could be with us today. Forums like this enable us to continue the very important work of sounding the alarm on climate change, and they afford the board a platform to explain how our agency is working toward a more sustainable future for us all. The timing of this conference is significant. In recent days, young people across the globe walked out of their classrooms and took to the streets to voice their fears and outrage over climate change. This very week, leaders from around the world met in New York to develop policies aimed at dealing with global warming. I bet you can guess who did not attend. And just yesterday, the United Nations issued a frightening report on how climate change is altering not only the temperature of the ocean, but its very chemistry. But what really caught my attention was a recent report that brought climate change closer to home for me. The story, which appeared in the Washington Post, described what has happened to Lake Hopatcong, New Jersey, in the last 100 years. In the early years of the 20th century, the winters were so cold that the area was home to a burgeoning ice industry. Hundreds of workers would carve blocks of ice, some of them 2 feet thick, float them to ice houses, pack them with sawdust, and load them on rail cars bound for the ice boxes of New York City and kitchens beyond. Fast forward to the 21st century, now the lake rarely freezes. In fact, as we all know, the temperature gets so high in that area in the summer that we have blooms of algae that make the lake a health hazard. The Lake Hopatcong story was the backdrop for a report that quantifies what is happening to New Jersey. The Post reported that since 1895, New Jersey's average temperatures have risen about 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, double the average for the lower 48 states. Our state is now one of the fastest warming states in the nation and exceeds the critical temperature threshold cited in the Paris Accords. Given the highly developed character of our state, our proximity to the ocean, and severe flooding risks, New Jersey is ground zero in the battle to protect our planet. And that is why Governor Murphy has made addressing climate change a top priority of his administration. He has set an ambitious goal of 100% clean energy by 2050. In June of this year, the governor's office released the state's new draft energy master plan, as President Cole mentioned, which outlines how we will achieve that goal. It represents a roadmap to help usher the state into our clean energy future. The draft energy master plan identifies 7 core goals that will guide the state's efforts over the next 30 years. They include 1, electrifying the transportation sector. And we know that 47% of our CO2 emissions come from cars, trucks, and buses. 2, investing in renewable energy and distributed energy resources such as solar, wind, and battery storage. 3, maximizing energy efficiency and reducing peak demand. Saving energy is the most cost-effective approach to our goals, and by leveling out consumption throughout the day, we can avoid additional investments in our energy infrastructure. 4, reducing emissions and energy use in the building sector. 5, modernizing the grid. We need to make the transmission system smarter and more resilient through the use of cutting-edge technologies. 6, supporting low and moderate income and environmental justice communities. These communities are disproportionately exposed to environmental risks and are less likely to have the resources to recover from extreme climate events. And 7, fostering an innovation economy and clean energy through workforce development and other incentives. With the Energy Master Plan as a roadmap, New Jersey will be on its way to meeting the emissions reduction goal set by the updated Global Warming Response Act. That is, an 80% reduction of emissions by 2050 relative to 2006 levels. The BPU is conducting several analyses to incorporate into the plan, including a modeling study of the state's entire energy system to identify the least cost pathways and to inform us on the path and scale required to achieve our objectives. It is imperative that we keep cost and ratepayer impact in mind as we work toward an equitable and sustainable clean energy future. While the BPU is taking the lead role in the development of the plan, we are being supported by a number of state agencies, some of whom are represented here today. We are working together to ensure we are choosing the most cost-effective and economically beneficial path. The final 2019 Energy Master Plan will be released later this year. Another example of interagency collaboration is a program called Partnership to Plug In, an electric vehicle initiative involving the Board of Public Utilities, the Economic Development Authority, and the Department of Environmental Protection that aims to put 330,000 electric vehicles on New Jersey's roads by 2025. That figure represents the number of electric vehicles necessary to make significant impact on our transportation sector CO2 footprint. It is my hope that we will expand beyond the current program and take steps to electrify our state vehicle fleet and New Jersey Transit. Certainly, we must lead by example. New Jersey is also leading the way on offshore wind, and we are truly doing things that are historic. In June, the Board of Public Utilities approved the largest offshore wind project in the nation, an 1,100 megawatt project to be built about 15 miles off the coast of Atlantic City. This wind farm, which will be using the largest and most powerful turbines in the world, will be operational in May of 2024. We will issue 2 additional solicitations of 1,200 megawatts in 2020 and in 2022. This historic initiative will move us closer to the governor's goal of 100% clean energy by 2050 and will provide power for 500,000 homes. And I should say that Commissioner Chivukula and I were in Charleston, West Virginia for the last couple of days meeting with our colleagues from other mid-Atlantic states. I can tell you we are way ahead on offshore wind. While the overriding goal is to reduce carbon emissions, we also want this offshore wind initiative to provide a foundation for a whole new industry in the state. We expect to see more than 20 gigawatts of offshore wind projects built in the Mid-Atlantic region. New Jersey can be the hub of the supply chain where the thousands of supporting industries can establish a base of operations and grow. Significant port and land-based infrastructure, buildings for storage and operations, heavy crane and laydown areas will be needed to support the construction and maintenance of the wind farms. We already have a commitment for a factory that will fabricate the foundations for the new wind project. To facilitate our economic development goals, the EDA, along with the Business Network for Offshore Wind, set up the New Jersey Offshore Wind Supply Chain Registry. This initiative will allow companies to publicly indicate their interest and ability to supply the necessary components and services for East Coast offshore wind projects. The registry already has more than 400 businesses enrolled since it was unveiled in April. New Jersey is really the ideal home for an offshore wind industry. We have excellent wind resources, a relatively shallow continental shelf, and tremendous demand for electricity. Our 130 miles of coastline is longer than that of any other mid-Atlantic state. The state's goal of 3,500 megawatts of clean wind generation capacity will help the state avoid millions of tons of carbon dioxide emissions every year, equivalent to taking more than 2 million cars off the roads annually. We believe our offshore wind program will be instrumental in helping our state combat the impacts of climate change. I'm also excited about another new clean energy initiative. The BPU just concluded its application period, as Commissioner Chivukula just mentioned, for the state's first community solar program. Community solar programs are being adopted throughout the country because they provide more equitable access to the financial savings and environmental benefits of solar generation. Unlike traditional solar installations, a community solar project does not need to be placed on a ratepayer's own roof. The system of panels can be installed over a parking lot, on a warehouse roof, atop an apartment building, or on a landfill or brownfield. The power produced by the installation is divided among multiple participants or subscribers who can choose to either purchase an ownership share of the installation or sign up for a monthly subscription. The subscribers then receive a credit on their monthly bill equivalent to their share of the energy produced. The flexibility of community solar makes the benefits of solar accessible to those whose property cannot support an installation or to those who are simply unable to afford the investment. What this means is that a resident of an apartment building in an urban area can benefit from a rooftop solar project built off the turnpike. This 3-year pilot program has earmarked 40% of the program for low and moderate income participants. And as Penja just mentioned, I'm very pleased to report that we have already received 252 project applications representing approximately 650 megawatts of solar capacity. We're very, very pleased about that. None of these initiatives could have been undertaken without the support and expertise of our partners in academia. We at the BPU are incredibly proud of the relationships we have built with such great institutions as the Clean Energy and Sustainability Analytics Center of Montclair State and their counterparts at our great public universities. A healthy engagement between academicians, and policymakers is essential to the development of informed, evidence-based public policy. The efforts I have described today give me hope that we will successfully confront the challenge of climate change. New Jersey has a history of leading America to a better way of life. I remind you that New Jersey is where Alexander Hamilton built the first factories that began the transformation of our country from an agricultural economy to an industrial power. New Jersey is where Edison commercialized electricity and changed our country forever. Our state is where the Johnson brothers built a pharmaceutical industry and where Bell Labs gave us transistors and lasers. I have no doubt that New Jersey will lead the way to a clean and sustainable economy. Thank you again so much for allowing me to join you today. I hope you enjoy the upcoming presentations and discussions. Thank you very much.